It's a new office, and it was created out of the housing plan that Nevin brought up earlier, the housing plan that the mayor passed last year. And so I'm honored to be the first deputy commissioner to oversee this office, and it actually builds on a lot of what Javier is saying, and I'll talk about that. But a lot of it has been, a lot of our work more recently has been around displacement, and it's about displacement not only of tenants, residents living in a lot of the neighborhoods that we're rezoning right now, but as well as the small businesses and grocers and retailers that the communities talk about that are affordable to them. So that was not anticipated when the housing plan came out, that it was going to be a big agenda around displacement in general, but it's becoming a bigger and bigger topic. So I put this slide up only to sort of talk about these are the types of things that people are beginning to miss and that are leaving from neighborhoods, and a strategy is becoming to be in place. And I'll talk about that at the back end of this presentation about what we're doing. But I'm just going to touch very briefly on the housing plan that the mayor created. So there are, as many of you may know, there's probably planning nerds in the room, but that the mayor passed the housing plan, which said that we are committed as a city to build 200,000 units, either through preservation of existing affordable housing or newly constructed affordable housing throughout the city. And there was a disparity and equality and equity agenda associated with that to make sure that every neighborhood in New York City would actually work toward achieving this idea of equity in neighborhoods, so that affordable housing would be throughout the city, and that there would be different strategies for doing that. And one of them is the Inclusionary housing program, which then brings up the rezoning that we're doing in neighborhoods. So not only was it an opportunity to look at affordability, but it was an opportunity to look at neighborhoods in a more comprehensive way. That's why the Office of Neighborhood Strategies was created. It was not only about creating affordable housing, but it was ensuring that the city's investment, particularly the housing investments that we would do in neighborhoods, actually achieved broader goals. So I put this slide up only to say that with 200,000 units and an amazing amount of pipeline that HPD generates each year, we actually have an amazing opportunity to affect the marketplace. So in previous years, when the green building movement and energy efficiency in buildings movement was just beginning, HPD worked closely with USGBC as well as the Enterprise Green Communities program to identify ways that we would require anything that we financed to be green and energy efficient. So now these standards are fairly, they're not fairly, they are a part of all of our pipeline that gets out of HPD. We require developers to comply with the Green Communities program at a minimum, but then that sets the stage for them to be more competitive, and usually what happens is they come back to us with gold and platinum and LEED sort of buildings, because everyone wants to make sure that when we are disposing of a public property, that they're achieving broader public policy goals, again changing the marketplace. Many of you probably know Villa Verde as an example of the way that it sets a precedent for other developers. These models that we create precedents for other developers. So not every project is a Villa Verde, but it sort of continues to push the market forward. It's an incredible project that had rental units as well as for sale units, and at various income levels, going down to 30% and 40% and up to 80% to 120%. So it was trying to deal with a broad marketplace in the Bronx to deal with working households as well as very low and extremely low income households. The interesting part about it was a turning point in us beginning to think about health in housing as well. So there's a series of terraces, and these terraces were actually built onto this. You sort of see the building in section here, but someone can actually get to each terrace by climbing stairs on the exterior of the building, and it leads at a mid-level to a gym that's located there as well. But it's an incredible project that gets published, and many of you probably know Villa Verde well, but it's always getting published is sort of pushing the envelope on both green building as well as health design. And it led then to us working with the Department of Design and Construction to create the active design guidelines for affordable housing. So my proposal now in 2016, as we begin right now, we're retooling a lot of our RFPs for the disposition of our public properties to build affordable housing. I plan to speak with the mayor's office about including the active design guidelines as, again, the next step in requiring, or portions of the active design guidelines as a requirement for anything that HPD finances. So we begin getting simple strategies at the beginning to change the marketplace again, so that we identify low-cost, high-impact types of strategies and design strategies within the buildings that I've just sort of here begun to outline that were taken from the larger book. But places like Arbor House, also in the Bronx, have begun then to push the envelope on using those active design guidelines. Amazing play spaces, and most importantly, or interestingly I should say, is a greenhouse that's on the top where residents can actually access the food or the produce that's produced on the roof, and much of it is sold to local restaurants in the neighborhood. So the housing plan then, with the 200,000 units, creates an amazing opportunity for the city to create, to increase the supply of affordability, but we want to do it in partnership with people. So I was able, like Javier's team, I was able to hire new planners to come on board, a lot of great, energetic planners who were interested not necessarily in just a land use proposal as the way we would rezone neighborhoods for inclusionary housing, but really looking at neighborhoods in a through a more comprehensive lens. Through that lens was the relationship that we created with Javier's office and the Department of Health to actually think more broadly. So I say planters wanted because we actually don't want to do all the work with ourselves. We don't think of ourselves, or nor do we want to work with consultants that think of themselves as the experts in the field, like the Howard Rourke and an Ayn Rand novel. Nor do we think of ourselves as Robert Moses as having the political authority to impose rezoning and land decisions, policy decisions into neighborhoods, but maybe along the beam spectrum of the Jane Jacobs, sort of thinking about a much more nuanced, vernacular approach to planning in our neighborhoods. This is an agenda change for not only the departments, city agency departments, but people. So what I'm looking for, and what I'm on a mission around, is to create citizen planners. People who actually problem solve versus come to us as advocates. The mayor has opened that gate. He's telling us that we cannot continue to do investment without the voices of people being included in the way we think about our investments. And people are ready. We talked already a little bit about displacement in neighborhoods and the fears and realities of people being exploited in low-income neighborhoods as the market is heading their way. So they're ready to engage. But again, what I want and what we need are not negotiators or advocates, but actually problem solvers, so that when we get to the table, we're identifying clearly what those problems all are, so we can solve for them, and then begin to talk about what we can and cannot do as city agencies. So not only do we think, or I'm thinking about people, our citizens of New York City become citizen planners, but we as city agencies have to become citizen planners. So we went through a process of a 4 or 5 month process where EDC, Economic Development Corporation, the Department of City Planning, and HPD, my office, hired a consulting group called Gale Studio and Good Court. They worked together to help us think through how we would organize ourselves to be able to meaningfully then engage people. So we talked a little bit about a formal process. The process then led to the neighborhood planning playbook, and it talked about the way that we would create interagency partnerships, again, so that we actually then could talk to each other well in order to then engage with people. Like Javier was saying, we have amazing data available to us in these agencies, but we don't always know the lived experience. So part of the problem-solving process is understanding what the truth is, the data, what the data shows us, but the truth is then made real by actually being in the neighborhoods, talking to people, and the way that it plays out in their everyday lives, what we're calling the lived experience. You see the process that we've proposed here, the way that we're going to work together, and we then began talking to people in the neighborhoods about the process. So the first meeting, for example, we aren't making decisions, we're actually just observing what's happening in the neighborhood. We're sharing data that they don't always have available to them. So that data then becomes much more meaningful to them when they think that something is happening and maybe it's not happening at the rate that they thought, or whatever the issues are, maybe it's happening faster, and we're able to then talk about those things and then subsequently begin developing solutions and strategies and then coming to some agreement on what the city is going to commit to and what also the neighborhood can also commit to doing in partnership with us. So again, these are our goals, our objectives around the neighborhood planning process. We're out in the neighborhoods. It has best practices in the manual as well, but these are the neighborhoods that we are rezoning in right now. And these are the first 7. We will continue to rezone and work in different neighborhoods and plan with communities in different neighborhoods. And the mayor is going to ask us to identify additional ones in the near future. We want to make sure that, again, we're identifying neighborhoods that these are all, as you know, are all low-income neighborhoods. We want to begin diversifying the types of neighborhoods that we're looking at so that we address a variety of concerns and that the equity issue is distributed throughout the city. So we need citizen planners in every corner of the city, so I hope you join me in my mission. So these zoning areas provide the opportunity for us to enter into the neighborhoods. So there's various ways. We want to work with the communities to identify the need, but the developers that we work with can provide the opportunities to actually meet that. It's up to us then to provide the incentive and support for them to do that. We worked over the past couple of years with the Design Trust for Public Space, and we worked with them on a book called Laying the Groundwork. Part of it is that HPD was designing and developing buildings with actually really bad retail or bottom ground floor space. So we worked with them to actually identify how the buildings could increase in height and still be contextual within the neighborhood. That led to the zoning text, Zoning for Quality and Affordability, that is in the neighborhoods right now. To be honest, it's not being well received by neighborhoods. They think the 5-foot increase is actually a way for developers to get additional FAR. But it's actually not. It's actually a way to get better buildings at the street level, and it is contextual with existing historic fabric of neighborhoods. And we're also working with these three agencies: Small Business Services, EDC, and HPD, are bringing different types of incentives and programs to small business owners. And I've just outlined some of them here, but we're ramping these up at the request of the mayor's office to make sure that we're helping to working with small businesses along these neighborhood retail corridors in various neighborhoods. Just a quick, and I'm teeing it up for the next speaker about Fresh. We're going to hear more about that in particular projects. But by actually going into neighborhoods, we can help sort of work, and all the work that HPD is going to be doing, we can begin using the Fresh program more deliberately now, because if we are hearing from neighborhoods and talking to neighborhoods about health and food access, we can then begin peddling, if you will, the Fresh program more deliberately in a lot of the projects that we finance with developers. It's an amazing program that both provides zoning incentives as well, so that it's good for the developer, as well as long-term financial incentives for the actual business owners. You can find more information about this on the EDC and the City Planning DCP's websites as well. So I'll conclude there, and we're going to actually give us some examples. So thank you very much.